My parents casually spent $10,800 on my credit card for my sister's dream cruise, and my mom smirked. You don't need the money anyway. I didn't argue, I didn't react. I just smiled and said, enjoy it. While they were out at sea, living their perfect vacation, I made one quiet decision that changed everything. By the time their ship docked, nothing was waiting for them the way they left it. My phone lit up with 25 missed calls, and suddenly, they were the ones with nowhere to go. You don't need the money anyway, my mother said, her voice dripping with that familiar dismissive tone that had followed me my entire life. She stood in my kitchen like she owned it, waving her hand as if the $10,800 she had just charged to my credit card was mere pocket change. I stared at the notification on my phone, the number glaring back at me like a cold accusation. $10,800.07, to be exact. My hands trembled slightly, but not from the sting of shock. I had stopped being shocked by my family's behavior years ago. This was the final crack in a dam that had been straining under the weight of their entitlement for far too long. My name is Jessica, and at 32 years old, I've spent a decade grinding as a senior accountant at a gaming company in Columbus, Ohio. I built my life from nothing, saving every cent and investing with a discipline that allowed me to own 2 properties outright. One is the modest apartment I call home, and the other is a 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood that I bought 5 years ago as my safety net. That house, the one I worked double shifts and sacrificed every vacation to afford, was currently occupied by my parents and my younger sister, Brittany. They had been living there rent-free for 3 years. Brittany has been so stressed lately, my mother continued, settling into one of my dining chairs as if she intended to stay forever. She needed this vacation, Jessica. You know how hard it has been for her since the breakup. The breakup she was referring to involved my 28-year-old sister ending a 6-month relationship because her boyfriend had the audacity to suggest she get a job. Apparently, the trauma of being asked to contribute to society required a luxury Caribbean cruise to heal. Mom, you used my credit card without asking, I said, my voice dangerously steady. That is fraud. She actually laughed, a light, airy sound as if I had just cracked a joke. Don't be dramatic, she replied. It is family, and family shares things. Besides, your father and I are going too. We haven't had a real vacation in years. When I reminded her they went to Florida last summer, she waved it off, claiming staying with an aunt didn't count as a real trip. This was the pattern. My parents took, I gave, and somehow I was always the villain for trying to draw a line in the sand. I explained that I had my own bills and expenses, but her expression hardened into something calculating. You own 2 houses and make good money at that computer job, she snapped. Meanwhile, your father's back keeps him from working, and I've sacrificed everything for you girls. This is how you repay us? The manipulation was a practice dance, but this time, the music had stopped. Maybe it was the sheer audacity of the amount, or the way she had helped herself to my private financial data. When does the cruise leave? I asked quietly. She smiled, sensing victory. Saturday morning, she said. We will be gone for 12 days. It is going to be wonderful. You should see the suite we booked with the balcony. I nodded slowly, my mind already racing. 12 days. They would be unreachable, floating in the middle of the ocean, spending money I would have to work months to earn back. Money they had stolen. Enjoy it, I told her, and I meant it in a way she couldn't possibly comprehend. She beamed and patted my hand like I was a child who had finally learned to share her toys. I knew you'd understand, she said. You've always been the responsible one we can count on. As the door closed, I stared at the banking app. $73,000. That was the total I reached after sitting down with a spreadsheet and tracking every cent I had funneled into their lives over the last 3 years. The free housing, the utilities, the emergency funds, the gifts that were never reciprocated. I had essentially lit my own future on fire to keep people warm who wouldn't even buy me a coffee. The house on Maple Drive was the ultimate symbol of this lopsided dynamic. I bought it at 27 with the intention of it being a rental property. Then my father's back gave out, and my mother claimed they just needed a place for 6 months. That was 3 years ago. Since then, my father hadn't seen a doctor more than twice. My mother had quit her part-time job because it was too exhausting, and Brittany hadn't worked in 2 years. I was paying the mortgage, taxes, insurance, and even for a new water heater and roof repairs. I remembered calling them last Thanksgiving, hoping we could be together. My mother claimed they couldn't afford the gas for the 40-minute drive to my place. When I offered to bring the entire meal to them, she declined, saying Brittany had made plans for them at a high-end Italian restaurant downtown because she was craving authentic pasta. I spent that holiday alone with takeout while they ate $50 entrees on my dime. Now, looking at the photo my mother sent from the ship's deck, champagne glasses raised and smiles wide, something in me finally calcified. The caption read, "Thanks for making dreams come true." They hadn't even invited me. The one who paid for the luxury wasn't even an afterthought. I wasn't a person to them. I was an ATM with a heartbeat. I pulled up the contact for Patricia, the real estate agent who helped me buy the properties. I asked her what the Maple Drive house was worth. $285,000, she told me, and the market was hot. I told her I wanted to sell. When she asked about the occupants, I explained they were family with no formal lease. She warned me it was a significant decision and that a quick sale was aggressive, but possible with a cash buyer. "Are you sure about this, Jessica?" Patricia asked. "There is no going back from this." I thought about my mother's smirk, my father's fake injury, and Brittany's endless entitlement. I thought about the 12 days of silence I was about to have while they were at sea. "I am sure," I told her. "I want to proceed." The magnitude of the decision didn't escape me. This would end my relationship with them forever. My mother would never forgive me, and Brittany would surely paint me as a monster on social media. But for the first time in my life, the fear of their rejection was smaller than the weight of their greed. I had the keys, I had the deed, and I had 12 days of total, uninterrupted control. I was finished being the family safety net, and by the time they stepped off that ship, the kingdom they had built on my sacrifice would be gone. The realization that I was merely a resource to them hit me with the force of a physical blow. A mother who mocked my genuine fears, a father who skipped my college graduation but never missed one of Brittany's dance recitals, and a sister who hadn't asked about my life in a decade. I logged into my property management portal and stared at the listing for the house on Maple Drive. My house. The one I had bled for. As I looked through the document section, I found something that turned my blood into ice. There was a residency declaration form, partially filled out in my mother's handwriting. They were trying to establish legal residency status to make it nearly impossible for me to ever evict them. The audacity of it was the final straw. This wasn't just about the stolen cruise money anymore. This was about my own survival against people who were trying to colonize my life. I texted Patricia, my real estate agent, with a single question: how soon can we meet? The next day, I took my first personal day in over 2 years. I told my boss it was a family emergency, and in a way, it was. I was finally treating my family like the emergency they were. I met Patricia at a quiet corner table at 10 in the morning. She came prepared with a thick folder and a look of professional gravity. She told me she had already made calls and found 3 potential buyers interested in a lightning-fast cash purchase. One investor, a man named Gerald, was particularly motivated. He specialized in exactly these types of messy situations. He offered $260,000, below market value, but he would pay cash and handle the occupants himself. When I asked about the residency form my mother had started, Patricia dismissed it. In Ohio, a half-finished form not filed with any official agency meant nothing. My family were licensees. They had permission to stay, but no legal tenancy rights. That permission could be revoked at any time. I winced for a split second, imagining my parents returning to changed locks and a 30-day notice to vacate from a total stranger. But that flinch was quickly replaced by a cold, hard satisfaction. Patricia told me Gerald was discreet and professional, and that he had already driven by the house. He was ready to up his offer to $265,000 with a 7-day closing. 7 days. My family would still be in the middle of the ocean. The entire transaction would be signed, sealed, and delivered before they even stepped off that boat. I didn't hesitate. I told her to proceed. We spent 2 hours buried in paperwork, signing disclosures and authorization forms. As I prepared to leave, Patricia touched my arm and told me that in 15 years of real estate, she had seen many ugly family dynamics. She told me I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was simply choosing to stop being a doormat. I left that coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in years. That evening, another photo popped up from the cruise. It was Brittany in a designer bikini by the pool, captioned, "Living my best life." She was living her best life on my stolen $10,000 while I sat in my apartment orchestrating the end of her free ride. I didn't respond. I just looked at the sales agreement. $265,000 was enough to pay off the debt they forced on me and secure my own future. The math was simple, even if the emotions were a storm. The sale moved at a breakneck pace. Gerald's legal team had the closing documents ready within 48 hours. 3 days after my meeting with Patricia, the final electronic signature line was staring at me. This was the point of no return. If I signed, the house would no longer be mine, and my parents would be someone else's problem to evict. My phone buzzed again with a video of them laughing and dancing at a shipboard show. They looked so carefree, so entitled to their joy on my dime. I signed the documents. The confirmation email arrived almost immediately, closing scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. In less than 24 hours, the house on Maple Drive would belong to Gerald. I expected to feel a crushing weight of guilt, but instead, I felt a profound sense of peace. For the once in my life, I wasn't making a choice for my mother or for Brittany or for the sake of a fake family harmony. I was making a choice for me. The closing went off without a hitch. By the time I finished my workday, $240,000 after commissions and fees was sitting in my account. Gerald didn't waste a single second. Within hours, his team had changed the locks and posted the formal notices on the front door. I kept the secret to myself, watching the clock as Sunday approached. By my calculations, they would arrive back in Columbus on Sunday evening, exhausted but still gloating from their luxury trip. They would walk up to the door, complaining about their luggage, only to find their keys useless and a stranger's notice taped to the wood. I knew the calls would come. I knew they would scream and accuse me of betrayal. I drafted a single response and waited. You chose to use my credit card without permission for a luxury vacation. I chose to sell my property. Both were choices. Both have consequences. Saturday night, I turned my phone completely off. I didn't want to hear the first wave of their rage. I slept like a baby. Sunday morning, I made myself an elaborate breakfast of Eggs Benedict and fresh juice, celebrating my independence. When I finally powered my phone on at 11 a.m., the notifications exploded. 25 missed calls. Dozens of texts. The voicemails were a frantic arc of emotion. The first was my mother, sounding merely annoyed that the door wouldn't open. By the third, my father was pleading for an explanation. By the fifth, my mother was screaming. By the 12th, she was threatening legal action and disownment. Brittany left 2 messages, one calling me an actual monster, the other a tearful, manipulative performance asking where she was supposed to sleep. I listened to every single one of them. Not once did they apologize for the $10,000. Not once did they thank me for 3 years of free housing. It was all about their inconvenience, their victimhood. My mother eventually tried to bargain, offering to pay me back over time if I would just fix this mistake, but I knew those were empty words. Brittany pivoted to insults, claiming I was just jealous of her beauty. At 2 p.m., my mother asked to meet in person at a coffee shop. For a heartbeat, the old me wanted to go and smooth things over. Then I remembered the smirk. I sent my prepared text about choices and consequences, and then I did what I should have done a decade ago. I blocked my mother. I blocked my father. I blocked Brittany. I cut every digital tie until the silence was absolute. 3 days later, the pounding started on my apartment door. I was working from home when the fists hit the wood. My mother's voice, shrill and indignant, pierced through the hallway. "Jessica, open this door right now." I stayed at my desk, my fingers moving steadily across the keyboard, letting her scream into the void of the hallway. "Talk to us. We are your family." The pounding on my apartment door continued for several minutes, a rhythmic, violent sound that echoed through the small hallway. I heard my father's low mumble, likely trying to quiet my mother down before she alerted the entire building, and then Brittany's voice joined in. Her tone was that grating mix of a whine and a demand. "Jessica, please," she cried out. "We just want to understand. What did we even do wrong?" As if they genuinely didn't know. As if stealing $10,800 was a minor misunderstanding. as if living in my property for 3 years while I bled money for their taxes, repairs, and utilities was just standard family behavior. Eventually, the ruckus drew the attention of my neighbors. I heard doors clicking open and muffled voices asking if everything was all right. My mother, ever the performer, tried to explain she was just visiting her daughter. Given my building's strict noise policies, I knew the front desk would be called soon. After 20 minutes of fruitless shouting, the noise finally tapered off. I heard their retreating footsteps and the distant ding of the elevator. I waited 10 more minutes just to be sure they were truly gone. That evening, I found a letter shoved under my door. It was written in my mother's cramped, urgent handwriting on lined paper torn from a notebook. "Jessica, I don't understand what is happening," it began. "Yes, we used your card, but we have always shared as a family. You never complained before. Is this really about money? Because I know you have plenty. You have always been the successful one who didn't need help. We are the ones struggling. Your father can barely walk, Brittany has depression, and I am exhausted from taking care of them. And now you have thrown us out of our only home. We are in a motel because of you. Is that what you wanted? To see your family suffer? I raised you better than this. I sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay me. I will never forgive you, but I am still your mother. If there is a chance to work this out, call me." I read the letter twice before folding it and placing it in a folder with the rest of their communications. Every sentence was a confirmation that I had made the right choice. The manipulation, the weaponized guilt, the total refusal to take accountability, it was all there. Even now, they couldn't admit they had done anything wrong. I didn't respond. The time for negotiations and one more chance had ended years ago. I had given them 100 chances over 32 years, and they had used every single one to take a little more of my soul. The following weeks were unexpectedly quiet. I eventually heard through the grapevine that they had moved in with a distant cousin. That arrangement lasted exactly 3 weeks before they wore out their welcome there, too. Meanwhile, I was doing something I had never permitted myself to do. I was living for myself. I stayed consistent with my therapy, learning that what I had endured wasn't just family drama, it was a calculated pattern of emotional and financial abuse. I reconnected with friends I had pushed away while I was busy being my family's unpaid caretaker. I started making plans that didn't require anyone else's approval. It wasn't a perfect upward climb. The guilt my mother had hardwired into me didn't just vanish. Some mornings I would wake up with a pit in my stomach, convinced I really was the monster Brittany claimed I was. But those moments of doubt grew shorter and further apart. The profound peace of not being constantly drained and exploited was worth more than any amount of money. The cruise debt remained on my statement, accruing interest, and I paid it off methodically. It felt poetic that their final act of greed would be the last thing I ever paid for on their behalf. 1 month after the sale, a formal letter arrived from a lawyer. My mother had followed through on her threat. The letter claimed I had illegally evicted them and demanded $100,000 in compensation for their suffering. I immediately sent it to the specialist Patricia had recommended. My lawyer's response was swift. "They have no case," she assured me. "The property was yours, there was no lease, and the new owner followed every legal protocol. This is just harassment to intimidate you into a settlement." She told me to ignore it, and she was right. No lawsuit ever materialized. Once a real lawyer looked at the facts, they realized there was nothing to sue for. 6 months later, I heard they had finally found a small, shabby apartment in a rougher part of town. My father was finally forced to apply for disability, a process he had avoided for years because it required actual medical documentation of his back pain. Brittany had moved in with a boyfriend she met online, and rumors suggested it was already falling apart. I felt no joy in their struggle, but I felt no guilt either. Their situation was the direct result of decades of choosing to exploit others instead of building their own lives. I had been their favorite target, but the target was gone. They had to face the world without me as their buffer. My own life had transformed. The proceeds from the house sale were safely invested, securing a future I once thought was impossible. My apartment finally felt like a sanctuary rather than just a place to hide. I took my first real vacation, a week in the mountains where I hiked and read in total silence. There was no one calling to demand money or favors. My mother tried one last time about 8 months in. She found my work email and sent a long message about her declining health and how she didn't want to die with this rift between us. I looked for a single word of apology, a single moment of, "I'm sorry for what I did to you." There was nothing. Just the same old demands wrapped in the guise of reconciliation. I deleted it without a word. Some foundations are too rotten to repair. I heard she told everyone I was a cold, selfish traitor who chose money over blood. She painted herself as the martyr and me as the villain. But I stopped caring about her narrative. I had my own truth, backed by bank records and the peace in my heart. I had my own future, no longer mortgaged to people who would never say thank you. Selling that house wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life. They called it betrayal. I called it survival. And if I had to go back to that Saturday morning when she smirked at me in my kitchen, I would make exactly the same choice again. I am finally free.